My name is Alyssa, and at 32, I never expected to be betrayed by my own brother. The old warehouse my grandfather left me wasn't just brick and concrete. It was potential others couldn't see. When I woke up to Jake's text, my stomach dropped. Sold your worthless building for $510 Kelvin. Family needs the money more than you. What he didn't know would change everything. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever had family betray your trust, hit subscribe. This journey isn't for the faint-hearted. Growing up, my grandfather Theodore was my rock. While other kids spent weekends at the mall, I followed him around his properties, absorbing everything about real estate like a sponge. He was a self-made businessman who started with nothing and built a modest empire of commercial properties through sheer determination and smart investments. His calloused hands and weathered face told the story of decades of hard work, and I treasured every minute I spent learning from him. My parents never understood my fascination with buildings and property values. Mom was a high school English teacher who preferred books to blueprints, and Dad worked in banking, but never had the entrepreneurial spirit that Grandpa Theodore and I shared. They weren't unkind, just perpetually confused by my interest in what they considered a boring industry. Then there was Jake, my brother, 3 years older and the undisputed golden child of the family. He had the kind of natural charisma that made people gravitate toward him, with his perfect smile and ability to charm anyone within minutes of meeting them. While I was quiet and analytical, Jake was loud and impulsive. Where I saved, Jake spent. Where I planned, Jake winged it. Yet somehow, his failures were always celebrated more than my successes. Jake just needs a little help getting back on his feet. Dad would say, writing yet another check to cover my brother's latest business venture gone wrong or credit card debt. By the time Jake hit 30, he had burned through 3 different careers, defaulted on 2 car loans, and moved back home twice. Still, my parents saw his potential rather than his pattern. I took a different path. After earning my business degree with a focus on urban development, I started at the bottom of a commercial real estate firm, working 60-hour weeks and living in a tiny apartment to save money. Grandpa Theodore noticed. While my parents fussed over Jake's latest scheme, my grandfather would invite me to coffee to discuss zoning laws and property appreciation. "You've got the eye, Alyssa," he'd tell me, tapping his temple with one finger. "You see what a place could be, not just what it is now. That's rare." When Theodore passed away 3 years ago, his absence left a gaping hole in my life. The family gathered for the reading of his will with varying expectations. Jake naturally assumed he would receive the lion's share as the eldest grandchild and only grandson. My parents subtly reinforced this assumption, speaking in hushed tones about family legacy and masculine industries that made my blood boil. The lawyer's office was silent as the will was read. Theodore had divided his assets with careful consideration. My parents received his house and investment accounts. Various small properties and savings were distributed among cousins and other relatives. When it came to his prized commercial properties, everyone leaned forward in anticipation. Jake received 2 established strip malls in affluent neighborhoods already fully leased with steady income streams. He barely contained his smug smile as the properties were described. Then came my inheritance, one abandoned warehouse in the oldest, most neglected part of downtown, an area that hadn't seen development in decades. The disappointment in the room was palpable. My mother patted my hand sympathetically while my father cleared his throat and muttered something about Theodore having his reasons. Jake didn't bother to hide his amusement. "Well, at least you got something," he chuckled later at the post-funeral gathering. "Though I'm not sure what you'll do with a crumbling tetanus factory. Maybe open a haunted house." What Jake and the rest of my family didn't understand was that Theodore hadn't given me a burden. He'd given me an opportunity. The final time we'd spoken, just days before his unexpected heart attack, we discussed that very warehouse district and the whispers of potential rezoning. He'd squeezed my hand with a knowing look, and now I understood why. "Jake got income," I explained to my friend Sophia over coffee the next day. "But Grandpa gave me potential. That's so much more valuable if you know what to do with it." While my family wrote off my inheritance as Theodore's sentimental mistake, I began quietly researching. The warehouse might have looked worthless to everyone else, but to me, it was a blank canvas in a location that I suspected would soon become very valuable indeed. When Jake called to joke about trading his strip mall for my decrepit dump, I politely declined, which only confirmed his belief that I was holding on to it for emotional rather than practical reasons. Little did he know that my grandfather's final gift would become the center of a family drama none of us could have anticipated, and that the worthless building would reveal the true nature of those closest to me. The first time I visited the warehouse after it officially became mine, I understood why everyone thought Theodore had played a cruel joke on me. The brick exterior was crumbling in places. Windows were boarded up and the inside was a cavernous space filled with decades of dust and abandoned equipment. But standing in that vast open area, sunlight streaming through holes in the roof, I didn't see decay. I saw possibility. I began my research immediately, spending evenings after my day job poring over city planning documents and development proposals. What I discovered confirmed my grandfather's foresight. The city had quietly been acquiring properties in the surrounding blocks. There were draft proposals for a comprehensive urban renewal project that would transform the entire district into a mixed-use development zone with tax incentives for tech companies and startups. The warehouse district sat between downtown and the river, a location that had been neglected during previous development booms, but was now perfectly positioned for the city's expansion plans. With the growing tech industry and housing shortage, it was only a matter of time before developers would start looking in this direction. I scheduled meetings with city planners, pretending to be concerned about how future developments might affect my property value. Each conversation revealed more pieces of the puzzle: infrastructure improvements planned for the next fiscal year, preliminary environmental impact studies already completed, and interest from several major tech firms in creating a satellite campus in our city. "This area is definitely on our radar," admitted one planning official after swearing me to discretion, "but we're trying to acquire properties quietly before speculators drive up prices." Armed with this information, I began creating a comprehensive business plan. I hired an architect friend at a discount rate to draft preliminary designs for converting the warehouse into a modern workspace while preserving its industrial character. The high ceilings, exposed brick, and massive windows that were currently boarded up would become selling points, not liabilities. The next step was far more challenging: securing funding. Bank after bank rejected my loan applications, unconvinced by my vision for a neighborhood that still contained abandoned buildings and had higher crime rates than other parts of the city. "The location is simply too speculative," one loan officer told me bluntly. "Come back when the city actually announces something official." Undeterred, I took on consulting work in addition to my full-time job, saving every penny. I spent weekends at the warehouse clearing out decades of debris myself to save on costs. My few friends thought I had lost my mind, sacrificing my social life for a derelict building. My family was even less supportive. "Alyssa's playing dollhouse with Grandpa's junk warehouse," Jake told our parents during a family dinner I barely had time to attend. Meanwhile, I've increased the occupancy rate at both my properties and raised rents by 15%. My parents beamed at Jake's business acumen while I silently pushed food around my plate, too tired from hauling trash all day to defend myself. What was the point? They wouldn't understand until I could show them results. The bureaucratic challenges were just as exhausting as the physical work. I navigated a labyrinth of permit applications, zoning variances, historical preservation reviews. The building was just old enough to require additional paperwork and endless inspections. Each step forward seemed to reveal 3 new obstacles. 6 months into my ownership, the first piece of luck fell into place. The city formally announced the first phase of the urban renewal plan, focusing on infrastructure improvements in the warehouse district. Property values didn't immediately skyrocket as I'd hoped, but investors started paying attention. A small angel investor group specializing in urban redevelopment agreed to provide partial funding for basic renovations after seeing my detailed business plan and learning about my background in real estate. It wasn't enough to complete the project, but it allowed me to fix the roof, update the electrical systems, and make the building secure. As work progressed, neighboring property owners started approaching me, curious about my plans. Some offered to buy me out, assuming I was renovating just to flip the property. I politely declined every offer, no matter how tempting the immediate profit seemed. "Allie dear, we need to discuss this situation as a family," my mother began, her voice syrupy with forced affection. "We may have acted hastily," my father added. "We didn't have all the facts." Translation: now that they knew the property was worth millions, they regretted giving it away for Jake's relatively small debts. The would-be buyer was also causing problems. Downtown Development Partners LLC, realizing they had nearly scored the deal of the century through fraudulent means, were attempting to distance themselves from the transaction while simultaneously trying to hold the sale agreement valid. Their lawyers contacted Robert with various threats and offers, alternating between claims they were innocent purchasers and suggestions of settling the misunderstanding. Meanwhile, 3 other development companies contacted me directly after reading the news story, each offering to purchase the warehouse legitimately for sums that made Jake's $510 look like pocket change. One offer reached $3.80, $8 million. The most surreal moment came when Jake's wife, Shannon, called me in tears. "Alyssa, you have to drop the charges," she pleaded. "Jake could go to prison. He's a good father. He made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday," I replied calmly. "What Jake did was calculated fraud. But he's your brother." "Yes. And that made the betrayal worse, not better." As the legal proceedings advanced, I received an unexpected call from the tech company I had been negotiating with before this chaos began. Despite the legal complications, or perhaps because of the publicity surrounding the property, they were still interested in leasing the renovated warehouse for their innovation hub. "We've been impressed with your vision for the building and your perseverance," their representative told me. "Once the legal issues are resolved, we'd like to resume our discussions." With this potential tenant still on board, and the city eager to include my property in their development plans, I realized that despite my family's betrayal, my grandfather's faith in me had been well placed. The warehouse wasn't just valuable real estate, it was proof that I had inherited Theodore's vision and business sense. Jake had tried to steal a building. What he didn't understand was that the true value wasn't in the bricks and mortar. It was in seeing potential where others saw only decay. That was something he could never take from me. The weeks following the revelation of my property's true value and my family's betrayal were some of the most challenging of my life. With Robert's guidance, I hired a specialized legal team that included a prosecutor-turned-white-collar crime attorney named Diana Chen and a real estate fraud expert named Michael Okafor. Their confidence gave me strength as we navigated the complex intersection of criminal and civil proceedings. "What your brother did constitutes multiple felonies," Diana explained during our first strategy session. "Forgery, fraud, filing false documents, identity theft. Each charge carries significant penalties." "I don't necessarily want Jake in prison," I admitted, surprised to find I meant it despite my anger. "I just want justice and for everyone to understand you can't steal from family and call it love." Michael nodded. "Our primary goal is to completely invalidate the fraudulent sale and secure the return of any funds already transferred. The criminal charges give us leverage, but they're separate from the civil case to restore your property rights." The legal process moved forward with excruciating slowness and surprising suddenness in turns. Some days, nothing seemed to happen. Other days brought multiple court filings, emergency hearings, and strategic decisions that needed immediate attention. I continued working my day job, though my boss had been understanding about my frequent absences for legal matters after the story hit the local news. Jake's response to the criminal charges swung between desperate attempts to reconcile and vicious counterattacks. One day, I'd received tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness. The next, his lawyer would file motions alleging I had verbally promised him the property or claiming he had misunderstood our grandfather's intentions. My parents launched a two-pronged campaign of emotional manipulation and social pressure. They called relatives, family, friends, even my former classmates, spinning a story of family hardship and my vindictive refusal to help my struggling brother. Some believed them. Others saw through the manipulation and reached out to offer support. "I always knew Jake was the golden child, but this is beyond belief," my cousin Rachel said when she called. "Count me as a character witness if you need one." The stress took a toll on my health and emotional well-being. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and found myself jumping every time my phone rang. When Diana noticed my exhaustion during a deposition preparation session, she made an unusual suggestion. "You need support beyond legal counsel. Alyssa, I'm going to recommend a therapist who specializes in family betrayal and high-conflict situations. This case will take months and you need to take care of yourself to see it through." Initially resistant, I eventually agreed to see Dr. Sampson, a no-nonsense therapist who helped me process my conflicting emotions about the case. I felt justified in pursuing legal action, but also grieved the family relationships that would never recover. I was angry about the betrayal, yet sometimes found myself wondering if I was overreacting a response. Dr. Sampson identified as the result of years of family dynamics that prioritized Jake's needs over mine. "Your family is hoping you'll fall back into old patterns," she explained. "They're counting on your desire for harmony to override your need for justice, but setting boundaries isn't vindictive. It's healthy." As the criminal case against Jake progressed, my parents finally grasped the seriousness of the situation. The district attorney had added charges of conspiracy against them for knowingly witnessing fraudulent documents. Facing potential legal consequences themselves, they hired separate attorneys and stopped their public campaign against me, though the private emotional appeals continued. "Your father could lose his banking license," my mother sobbed during one of her increasingly rare calls. "Our reputation in the community is ruined." "Is that what you wanted?" "I wanted my family to respect my property rights and not commit felonies," I responded, a statement Dr. Sampson later praised as a healthy boundary. The legal battles consumed so much of my energy that I had little left for social connections, but surprisingly new supportive relationships emerged from the chaos. Diana introduced me to a women's business network where I met other female entrepreneurs who had faced their own challenges. One of them, Isla, owned a successful architectural salvage business and immediately understood the value I saw in the warehouse. "You've got to show me this place when all this legal nonsense is over," she insisted. "I bet there are amazing architectural details hiding under years of neglect." Through Layla. I connected with Derek, a commercial real estate developer with experience in historic renovations, who offered practical advice on navigating city permits and preservation requirements. Unlike my family, these new connections saw my vision for the warehouse as exciting rather than delusional. For months into the legal proceedings, we received our first major victory. The judge in the civil case ruled that the sale was invalid due to the fraudulent documentation officially returning ownership of the property to me. The funds Jake had received were ordered to be returned with interest and penalties. Jake's attorney immediately filed an appeal, but Robert assured me it was unlikely to succeed given the evidence. Still, the criminal case continued with Jake facing multiple felony charges that could result in prison time. It was during this period that Jake finally reached out with something resembling genuine remorse rather than self-pity. He requested a meeting through our attorneys, and against Diana's advice, I agreed to see him in a neutral location with our lawyers present. Jake looked terrible with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated posture I'd never seen in my charismatic brother before. "I never thought it would go this far," he said after an uncomfortable silence. "I just saw a solution to my problems and took it by stealing from me." I stated flatly. "I didn't think you valued that old building. You never told any of us what you were planning because every time I tried to talk about my work, you and Mom and Dad dismissed it. But even if the warehouse had been worthless, it was still mine, not yours to sell." Jake nodded slowly. "I get that now. I really do. I'm trying to make this right, Alyssa, but I need your help. The plea deal they're offering still includes jail time." There it was. The real reason for the meeting. Jake wasn't seeking reconciliation. He wanted me to intervene in his criminal case. "That's between you and the district attorney," I said, rising to leave. "Some things can't be fixed with an apology and family loyalty." Jake, as I walked away, I realized I had finally broken the pattern of putting Jake's needs before my own. A small victory in a situation with no true winners, but a crucial step in my personal growth nonetheless. 8 months after Jake's text message upended my life, the legal battles finally reached their resolution. Jake accepted a plea deal that included 2 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service, full restitution of the funds received from the fraudulent sale, and a felony conviction on his record. In exchange, he avoided prison time, an outcome that brought me more relief than I had expected. My parents received probation and community service for their roles as accessories along with hefty legal bills that depleted much of their retirement savings. The would-be buyers ultimately dropped all claims to the property after evidence emerged suggesting they may have known about the fraudulent nature of the transaction, likely avoiding their own criminal charges in the process. The warehouse was unquestionably mine. Again, its value now widely recognized and continuing to rise as the city's development plans progressed. What had once been my private vision was now public knowledge, attracting attention from investors, developers, and potential tenants across the region. "You've become quite the real estate celebrity," Robert joked during our final meeting to close the civil case. "Not the way anyone would want to gain recognition, but your grandfather would be proud of how you've handled this." The media coverage had indeed raised my profile in the real estate community. The story of the worthless warehouse that turned out to be worth millions stolen by a brother who didn't recognize its value resonated with people. I received invitations to speak at business events, declined offers to option my story for a TV movie, and fielded constant inquiries about the property's future. More importantly, the tech company that had been interested before the legal chaos remained committed to the project. After months of negotiations, we signed a 10-year lease agreement for 90% of the renovated space at terms that would ensure the building's profitability for years to come. "We love the story behind this building," their CEO told me at the contract signing. "It embodies the vision and perseverance we want our company to represent." The city's partnership proved equally valuable. Their matching grant program provided $3 million for historic preservation elements of the renovation funds that allowed me to restore the building's distinctive architectural features while creating a modern, functional interior. The 20% of space dedicated to public use would house a tech training center for underserved youth, creating a pipeline of local talent for the building's commercial tenants. With the legal issues resolved and development plans underway, I faced the more personal aftermath of the ordeal. Family gatherings were now complicated affairs with relatives taking sides and uncomfortable silences when Jake or my parents entered a room. I attended my cousin's wedding, maintaining polite distance from my immediate family while reconnecting with extended relatives who had reached out in support during the court proceedings. Jake made awkward attempts at reconciliation, sending birthday cards and occasional texts that I acknowledged but didn't encourage. His wife Shannon reached out more genuinely apologizing for her part in pressuring me to drop charges and inviting me to their children's school events, which I sometimes attended sitting quietly in the back. "The kids miss their Aunt," Shannon told me during one such event. "They don't understand what happened. They don't need to." I replied, this is between the adults. My parents found the new family dynamic more difficult to navigate. After decades of enabling Jake's behavior and dismissing my ambitions, they struggled to accept that the family power balance had shifted. My financial success contrasted sharply with their diminished retirement circumstances and Jake's continuing money troubles as he worked to pay restitution. We always wanted the best for both our children, my father said during a strained Thanksgiving dinner at my aunt's house. We never meant for things to turn out this way. I know. I responded because I did understand. Their favoritism toward Jake hadn't been malicious. They simply couldn't see past his charm to recognize his pattern of poor choices. They had failed me as parents, but not out of cruelty, out of blindness. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished. Using the warehouse project as leverage, I negotiated a partnership at my firm specializing in urban redevelopment and adaptive reuse of historic properties. The value of the warehouse continued to climb as the renovation progressed and the surrounding neighborhood began its renaissance. 6 months after the legal proceedings concluded, I received a development proposal that brought the story full circle. A major real estate investment group offered to purchase the fully leased warehouse for $4.5 million, a figure that would represent an extraordinary return on my investment of time and resources. I scheduled a meeting with my new financial advisor, Marina, to discuss the offer. It's an excellent price, she confirmed after reviewing the terms. Well above market value. They're betting on the area's continued appreciation. Selling would give me capital for other projects I'm used. But something doesn't feel right about it. Marina studied me for a moment. This isn't just about numbers for you, is it? This building represents something more. She was right. The warehouse had become more than a property. It was tangible proof of my grandfather's faith in me, my own business acumen, and my ability to stand firm against those who had undervalued both the building and me. Selling now would bring profit, but at the cost of something less tangible, but more valuable. I'm going to decline, I decided. This project isn't finished yet. As the renovation neared completion, I found myself thinking about my grandfather more often. Standing in the nearly finished space with its restored brick walls, massive windows now unboarded to flood the interior with light and original wood beams carefully preserved. I could almost feel his presence. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered to the empty building. I did have the eye for it. The warehouse that my family had dismissed as worthless had become the cornerstone of my professional reputation and financial security. More importantly, the fight to keep it had taught me to value myself and my vision, even when those closest to me could not see what I saw. As I walked through the space that would soon buzz with innovation and activity, I realized that the true transformation wasn't just in the building itself, but in the woman who owned it. 1 year after the legal battle ended, I stood on a temporary stage in the central atrium of what was now called the Theodore Innovation Center, named in honor of my grandfather. Hundreds of people gathered for the grand opening. City officials, employees of the tech company that occupied most of the building, students from the technology training program, media representatives, and members of the business community who had watched this project unfold with interest. When I inherited this building, most people saw only what it was, an abandoned warehouse in a forgotten part of town, I told the crowd. But my grandfather taught me to see potential where others see problems. And that vision is what we're celebrating today. The renovated space was magnificent. The original industrial character remained intact, exposed brick walls, restored wood beams, and factory windows, now complemented by modern amenities and sustainable technology. The central atrium featured a preserved section of the original machinery as an art installation honoring the building's past while embracing its future. As I cut the ribbon and the crowd applauded, I scanned the faces before me. My new circle of supporters was well represented. Robert, Diana, Isla, Derek, and other professionals who had helped make this project a reality. Conspicuously absent were my parents and Jake. Though I had sent them invitations out of courtesy, their absence was both a sadness and a relief. This moment of triumph was simpler without the complications of our damaged relationship. In the years since the court cases concluded, I had established a new normal with my family. We maintained limited contact on my terms, occasional phone calls, carefully scheduled holiday appearances, brief exchanges at family events. The closeness we once shared was gone, replaced by a civil distance that protected my boundaries. While acknowledging our shared history, Jake had surprised everyone by taking his legal consequences seriously. His community service hours at a housing nonprofit had evolved into a part-time job, and he was slowly working to repay both the court-ordered restitution and his numerous other debts. Whether this represented genuine change or merely adaptation to his reduced circumstances remained to be seen, but it was more responsibility than he had shown in the past. My parents had struggled more with the aftermath. Their social standing in the community had suffered, and friends who had once admired their parenting now questioned their judgment. The financial strain of legal fees had forced them to downsize their home and adjust to a more modest retirement than they had planned. More difficult for them was the shift in family dynamics. Jake's legal troubles had finally revealed the pattern that I had seen for years. His charm concealing a willingness to take shortcuts and avoid consequences. They could no longer maintain the fiction that his financial difficulties were just bad luck or temporary setbacks. We enabled him, my father admitted during a rare honest conversation 6 months after the case ended. We never taught him that actions have consequences, and we didn't see your potential, my mother added quietly. We were wrong about both our children. This acknowledgement, while healing, couldn't erase decades of favoritism or the trauma of their betrayal. Dr. Sampson helped me understand that forgiveness didn't require forgetting or returning to old patterns. You can release the anger without releasing the boundaries. She explained, forgiveness is for your peace, not their comfort. This perspective allowed me to move forward without bitterness, maintaining appropriate distance while acknowledging that my family had acted from misguided love rather than malice. They had genuinely believed that Jake's needs outweighed my rights, a fundamental value difference that I could understand without accepting. My professional growth had been equally significant. The success of the warehouse project established me as an expert in adaptive reuse and urban renewal. I left my old firm to start my own development company, focused on revitalizing overlooked properties, applying the lessons I had learned from the warehouse to new projects throughout the city. As my business grew, I made a point of mentoring young women entering the male-dominated real estate industry. Once a month, I hosted workshops in the Innovation Center community space, sharing practical knowledge about property evaluation, financing strategies, and navigating bureaucratic obstacles. The most valuable skill in this business isn't financial analysis or construction knowledge, I told these aspiring developers. It's the ability to see what could be, not just what is. That vision is what transforms neighborhoods and creates opportunity. After the grand opening ceremony, as guests explored the building and celebrated its transformation, I slipped away to the rooftop terrace we had created as part of the renovation. From this vantage point, I could see the city skyline and the surrounding neighborhood where new development was already spreading outward from the catalyst of our project. Isla joined me at the railing, taking in the view. Quite a difference from that first time you showed me the building. Remember all the pigeons and that collapsed staircase? I laughed. I remember you were the only person who didn't think I was crazy for seeing potential here. That's because I know value isn't always obvious, she replied. Most people want the easy win, the property that's already improved or the relationship that doesn't require work. They miss the hidden gems because they're afraid of the effort. Her words resonated beyond real estate. My family had valued ease over integrity, choosing the quick solution of stealing my property rather than facing Jake's financial problems. Honestly, they had seen only the surface, a seemingly worthless building rather than the potential beneath. The hardest lesson from all this, I confessed, was accepting that the people who should have believed in me the most were the ones who underestimated me the worst. But maybe that's why Grandpa left me this building instead of one of the easier properties. He knew I had the strength to fight for it if necessary. The year of healing had brought me to a place of surprising peace. The betrayal that had once consumed my thoughts had become just one chapter in a longer story of growth and success. The warehouse that my brother had dismissed as worthless had become the foundation of a thriving business and a transformed neighborhood. The family relationships I had once thought essential had been replaced by friendships and professional connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As we returned to the celebration, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond the building project. I had not only preserved my inheritance, but had transformed it into something greater than even my grandfather might have imagined. More importantly, I had transformed myself from someone whose value was determined by family expectations into a woman who defined her own worth. The journey from betrayal to triumph had taught me that true value isn't determined by others' assessments. It comes from having the vision to see potential where others see nothing, the courage to defend what's yours, and the wisdom to know when to hold firm and when to let go. Have you ever had someone underestimate what you valued most? Only to prove them wrong in the end. Share your story in the comments below. If this tale of standing your ground against family betrayal resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories of triumph over life's toughest challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes what others see as worthless holds the greatest value of all.